Hello everyone, welcome to the last panel discussion of today, the Finance and Co-Production Day. This one, Creating Universal Stories for Film and TV, moderated by Liz Shackleton, who's accompanied by Ayman Zyoud, Nils Hartmann and Mike Lerner. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. So over the last few days at the forum, we've been learning a lot about financing and co-production. We've also looked at digital distribution and marketing. Everything that we've talked about so far has been very focused on the business and the numbers. So we thought it'd be interesting in this session to look a little bit more at the creative side of film and TV production. So we have three guests with us today who come from very different corners of film and TV production. So I'm just going to start by getting them each to explain a little bit about what they produce and what they do. So can we start with you, please, Ayman?
It's on. Thank you, Liz. And hello, everyone. Charisma Group is the fastest growing production company in the Middle East. We produce over 4,000 TV hours on a yearly basis. Our focus is really the region, the Middle East, and we are a company that is based, that focuses its business on local content and local relevant content, which means we create content from scratch, stemming from our audience in the region, as well as acquiring content that is really relevant to our audience in the Middle East and North Africa.
And can you explain a bit more about the formats and types of content that you produce? You're telling me it's drama, but it's also across many different formats. We
do drama, but it's not our primary production. We do more TV production, talk shows, game shows, reality. We've done a couple of drama projects. A film, the first film that was actually shown in Saudi Arabia in public after 40 years of ban, it was produced by us. And that was in 2009.
What was the name of that?
It had a very local name. It's called Munahi. And it was the first movie to be shown in Saudi Arabia in public parks across the board. It just resonated all over the world. It was a big event, you know, because there are no theaters, cinemas in Saudi Arabia.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
So Nils, you're Director of Original Productions at Sky Italia. Can you just explain a little bit about what you've been producing there?
Okay. Hi, everyone. I manage the scripted part, so all the drama side, but also the entertainment format. So I'm a bit schizophrenic between X Factor and Gomorrah. So Gomorrah is the latest series we produced. It's a book by an author called Roberto Saviano that has been an international case. Saviano in the last 10 years has been living with a police escort because he spent a couple of years within the Napolitan mafia and told that story. That then became a movie that won at the Cannes Film Festival, and then we produced a series from the book and the movie. So that's our drama slate, and the latest example is Gomorrah, and then on the other side we have the entertainment
So also
bit.
very broad.
Yeah.
And Mike, could you tell us a little bit about Roast Beef Productions, what you've been doing?
Yeah, we started a company about 10 years ago, and we've had fortunately some good success with films like Afghan Star, Hell and Back Again, Smash and Grab, Story of the Pink Panthers, film about Pussy Riot, A Punk Prayer, and The Square, which actually was showing in Dubai last year.
As was Smash and Grab.
As
so
was Smash and Grab, indeed. We had two films here last year, and you know, our main focus is on feature documentary, and we do some TV series as well. So yeah, we're always interested in this conversation, of course.
And it's all reality based.
All reality based, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So one of the first things I wanted us to talk about is just how you go about that whole process of finding stories, how you find something that is suitable for what you want to develop, and do you think that one story can work across different formats? So Ayman, perhaps you could start by talking about how you go about finding the ideas and stories in the first place.
Well, the basis of finding any story, if you're talking about how we source our content, how we really get access to our content, well, today is different than like a year ago or 2 years ago. Today we have the internet, where there's a lot of, it's beyond the, beyond the writers of Hollywood and the people who went to college for 5 years or 4 years studying film and TV. Today, when you find a story online that has the basics of any production that can resonate to the audience, which has, in my opinion, can create some emotional resonance, and through the human truth. If you find that success online, you can grab that person and take them on, and take them on board, and you invest in them. So there's a lot, of sourcing content through the digital platforms nowadays than before.
What are you looking at specifically? Something that's gone viral, or something that's a big hit?
If it has gone viral, it means it's successful.
Right.
So we definitely, get after it. But any story that finds interest from the audiences, and we have immediate measures, that's an interest to us. But other than that, the way we source content, we have our own model, the Charisma Content Development model, which is, we are a company that is inspired by the audience, so we are very much rooted in what our audience want. From a cultural standpoint, we produce for cross borders. The Arab world, it's a kind of a unique case, because we have about 22 countries that speak the same language with different dialects, but more or less, and you can understand each other. And we have also in common the religious factor, which plays a big role in the cultural factor. So when you add these two together, it's easy to go cross-border. And these stories usually are really easier to produce and find audience for and finances for in our region.
I see, thanks. I want to come back later to talk about the pan-Arab market and whether it really exists, but we'll just move on to Nils. Could you tell us a little bit about the genesis of Romanzo Criminale and Gomorrah, like how you found the story and how the project was put together?
When we launched the drama slate in Italy, being a satellite network, the most important thing was to differentiate ourselves from the public broadcasters. So the first motto, the headline I came up with was, if it works for Mediaset and Rai, it ain't no good for Sky. So public broadcasters were doing popes, saints, and bicycle heroes. We were going for porn stars and criminals. That was the direction. So the other issue for us was, how can we cut through the clutter? We have over 100 channels on the platform. People are watching content on the web. Free TV is producing a big drama slate. So it was important for us to have something that would cut through all the noise. So it was when we were presented the idea of Romanzo Criminale, that had been a very successful book in Italy, based on a true story of a criminal gang that existed in Italy and still exists to an extent. The book became a movie, one of the better Italian movies that traveled internationally. And so we decided to do the series because there was enough stuff in the book to do a long-running series. And the brand, Romanzo Criminale, in itself helped a lot, because people immediately would know what that was about. And same story with Gomorrah. Gomorrah has been an even more successful book, sold all over the world. That became a movie, internationally recognized. So from a communication point of view, if you want to get the people there to watch your production, alone the brand Gomorrah would attract attention. Then you obviously have to produce a good series, but that's something else. So for us, these elements were important. Plus, we felt and probably still feel that bad guys work better than good guys. But that's since
universal.
Shakespeare. We've been on both cases told by the Italian politicians that we were morally wrong, because you cannot tell the evil, you have to have good examples, which is complete bullshit, if you excuse my French, because that's what kind of screwed up the Italian fiction storytelling all the way. You always have to have the story with the good guy and the bad guy, and whenever there's a criminal, you have to have a priest somewhere who does something good, and that is not what it is about. It's about telling something relevant, emotionally believable, close to reality. And if we would have, as at a certain point some executives told me, put a good cop inside Gomorrah, we would have screwed the entire project up. It's about telling different shades of evil. It's really close to what is happening nowadays in Italy. So the two elements, let's say the dark side and the truthfulness, is what we were looking for.
And is it much easier to do a series that's based on a proven property like a film or a book than something that's completely original?
I think it helps. I think now we are at a stage where our next project that will air in spring is called 1992. 1992 is the year that changed Italian politics, because it was the year where the first arrest was made in Milan, so the link between corruption and politics. It was the rise of Berlusconi and the rise of the Lega Nord, the Northern Party, and the fall of the old political system. To tell the story 20 years later is funny because nothing has changed whatsoever. Berlusconi, unfortunately, is still
locally
around.
relevant.
Sorry?
Locally relevant.
Yes. But, well, I guess Berlusconi is one of the brands, unfortunately, we have exported all over the world, so it could have some interest internationally. And that's an original idea. So we are now in a phase where we're looking for original concepts.
Right, thank you. So both of you really are looking at content from the point of view of a TV audience. I mean, that's one of the first things that's in your mind when you're developing a new project. So Mike, how about you? How do you go about finding your subjects and your stories? And are you also thinking, how is this going to play on TV, or is it more theatrical for you? What's that whole process?
Well, we do produce some straightforward non-fiction TV as well, but yeah, we're talking about feature films, and I wish I had a kind of actual method, and there isn't one, but and stories come in various ways. Sometimes, I mean, we made the Pussy Riot film. I mean, I remember the day back in January 2012 when I opened the newspaper and saw these guys doing their protest in front of the Kremlin and thought, who are these people? And then, of course, they get arrested, and you think, well, for this silly crime, and you're thinking, well, this has got all the makings of a big story. So, you know, so that's one method. You'd read the newspaper. I mean, probably on a daily basis, you could find a story in a national newspaper that could, in some way or another, transform into a feature film. And sometimes we're very lucky, and people come to us with material they've been developing or ideas that they have. And again, if we see you know, a future in that, then we will get involved and help that. And we've been very lucky. We've got a new film at Sundance in January, which is a film called The Russian Woodpecker, which is a really extraordinary film. I won't go into the details of it, but I just got an email from the director one morning and sent me some of this material, and it was just incredible. So sometimes that happens, but yeah, I think perhaps we'll go on and talk a bit later about what the difference between a TV documentary and a feature film. And I think we will have perhaps a lot to say about that. But in terms of how you choose, I mean, again, luck is really the key, I think.
Right, but do you have to have a personal connection to that story to take it on? If somebody pitched you an idea and you thought, well, that's great, but I don't have a personal connection to it, would you still do it?
Well, you're looking for the personal connection in a way. Perhaps that's the whole point, and about and if it's something you can empathise and identify with, and we have made films literally all over the world, and I don't see that its geographical location is necessarily important. What's important is, do we connect to these people as human beings, and can we empathize with them, and are we interested in them, simply?
I think the more people really empathize with that, if the producer empathizes with the viewer and creates that emotional resonance, then you find, through human truth, then you'll find a lot of people really interested in your product, and they want to watch it because it mirrors them. And once it mirrors them, then they find interest in it, and it becomes very relevant to them, regardless where they are and in which territory they are. So I guess TV, it's the same way. Wherever you are in the world, we follow the same rules.
Right, great, and we'll come back to that in a minute as well. But you just touched on something, Mike, I think we should talk about first. I think it's the topic of this seminar. What are the differences between, or are there any differences between stories that work for TV and film and documentary, in your experience?
Well, I guess essentially the difference between a feature film and a television documentary is scale, really, and whether it's the you know, the sort of length of time that a story evolves over, or the levels of nuance and sophistication that the story has. I mean, some things can't be told in 47 minutes or whatever a traditional television hour is, you know, and you know, some. I think, again, also characters, I think, are just sort of bigger than that as well. So whilst it's obviously possible to reduce anything, I guess, certain things do demand, I think, more time and space to you know, you might have a lot of backstory to tell, you might have, a range of issues that the film is dealing with. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons that it demands that. And I think, you know, and perhaps we're guilty of this ourselves, I mean, some things actually don't demand that, and I think very often, I think where films fail is when they actually are trying to roll out a story a bit too thinly, and it doesn't really sustain. I mean, you know,
over a feature film format.
But on the whole, it's usually kind of obvious, I think, that something it deserves that kind of space and that kind of, you know, demand on an audience to pay $20 and go into a cinema and spend 90 minutes or longer of their time. I mean, we had the film The Square here, and that was I mean, it's about 110 minutes, but it's, you know, that's a film about a 3-year revolution. I mean, this is a huge, huge story, and you know, I can't imagine telling that story in an hour. You know, that would be.
But
crazy.
do you think that story, would it have made a narrative feature? Could it have been a fiction film?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things, you know, perhaps we should discuss now is, to me, I don't actually see any particular difference between a good fiction film and a good non-fiction film, and they both have the same demands, you know, and the same qualities, and that is, you need a star. You know, every film has to have stars, and we look for films that have stars, whether they're revolutionaries taking part in a world lifetime-changing event, or participants in a music competition, or Russian dissidents trying to challenge a state, or, you know, the character and the quality of the character is absolutely the #1 issue. And so, you know, and I think good non-fiction filmmaking is looking for. Bigger pardon, good fiction filmmaking is looking for those qualities as well. It's looking to be as realistic as possible. So, I mean, advice I do give to people making feature documentaries is, you know, you think of your poster, your log line, description of the film, everything as though it was a fiction film. You know, how would you bill it? You know, one man against the universe, or, you know, these big grand terms. You know, I think that's very helpful. And as I say, I think it works in reverse as well for fiction films.
That's interesting. Yeah, no, it makes total sense. Nils, what was it about Gomorrah that made it work across film and TV? I mean, you know, what qualities do you need to have in a story so that it can work across both formats?
It's an interesting point he brought up, and I was telling Mike before that Gomorrah was actually invited to the Salina Documentary Film Festival because their approach was realistic, and because it was really important to us, the way you tell the story, the way you produce actually needs to be on the ground and close to reality, because otherwise your drama won't be believable. And funny enough, Romanzo Criminale has been sold in over 60 territories. Gomorrah, we are around 100. And talking about global and international co-production, this is not only a local production, it's hyper-local. Because Gomorrah was not shot only in Italian, it was shot with a Napolitan accent. Not only a Napolitan accent, but a certain part around Naples where they speak a very specific dialect. And one of our biggest issues was the language. The first day I got the rushes, I called the director, Stefano Soliman. I told him, Stefano, you have an extra room in your house. And he said, no, why? Because they will fire me and I will come and live in your house if we need to subtitle this series. But he made a very strong point, and there was a lot of work that went into keeping the original dialect, inserting here and there a word that was close to the dialect but Italian to make it comprehensible. Because if we would have shot in Italian with a funny Napolitan accent, it wouldn't have been believable for the audience. It would have been something else. And I really believe this is a very strong point that ties in with documentaries. You need it to be close to reality, I think. Then there's the drama construction side, and I think compared to feature documentaries or feature films, in a drama series, you have the great advantage that you can have many conflicts, keep them on as much as you want. You can have go really into depth with the characters of your series, whereas in a movie, usually the conflict needs to be resolved by the end of the 90 or 100 minutes. The drama is the opposite. You want probably at the end of season 1 to close with another conflict because you need to take people to the next season. And I think that is the reason why more and more people from the movie industry, be that scriptwriters or directors or actors, are fascinated by drama series, because the good quality, the high level of drama series, from House of Cards onwards, allows you that kind of depth that with a movie, due to a very banal time constraint, you cannot have.
So you can't go into the backstory of the characters in
you
a
can,
movie,
and
like
good movies do.
But not
but
to the same depth as a
There's a
TV
limitation
series.
that ends in 120 minutes. Okay, if you're Terrence Malick, you take it to 180 minutes, but you'll always find the movie director frustrated, and he will always tell you that he had enough footage to edit a 4-hour movie. Now that unfortunately doesn't work in a movie theater.
That's why you need producers. But do you think there are some stories, some films that just couldn't be a TV series? There's not enough there to stretch it over a...
Yeah, probably hard to do a comedy turn into a series, so I think it's a lot about the strength of the characters and the drama you have in the stories. I think probably from a technical point of view, you could take any material and turn it into a series, probably not always successfully. I think it's a lot in the strength of the characters and the weight of the drama you feel in a movie to turn that into a movie. But again, to us it has been, we didn't look for movies to turn movies into series, it just happened. And we don't necessarily need to do that.
We're asking ourselves the same question. We have a project right now that the director is saying, you know what, but I can, it's a series, I can make a movie out of it. And if it's a movie, I can make a series out of it. They're always excited about doing that. But we all know in the industry that writing for series is different from writing for, a movie. So it could apply. I think you could condense a series into a movie, but it could be harder for us, and it requires maybe more creative work to take a movie into a series, especially after it's been, premiered or it's been seen. There are creative inputs that makes them harder or requires different talents and scripting requirement and production requirement and cost to take a movie into a series. It's easier to take a series back into a movie, in my opinion, from my humble experience.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you. I also want to talk a little bit about stories that travel, and we have touched on this already, and you've mentioned that something that's very reality-based or even very regional can work. Could you talk about that a little bit more in terms of what is it exactly in a story that helps it transcend cultural barriers?
I've probably touched on this before, and I will repeat again, because it's my belief this is what are the basics of the basis of a story to travel. It is to go beyond the localities of the story. It's to touch upon humans. We have common things as humans that makes us want to, that makes us actually relate to a certain story. So betrayal, love, hatred, I don't know, bad guys, kidnapping, all these kind of international, human themes makes them cross borders much easier than a local culture-specific story. The more you run out of the specifics of the culture, in my opinion, it will travel and resonate to more audience. Now, from a festival standpoint and being seen in festivals and receiving awards, that's another story. If we're looking for a commercially viable product and a product that will be seen by millions and millions of people, I think we need to look at, we need to mirror that with our audiences.
So you need to take out the very culturally specific references.
In my opinion, for the exception of, like for example, Hollywood and, having Tom Cruise on the top of Burj Khalifa, I think that is, that's in Dubai, but that would resonate all over the world. So that's a simple example of, how you can take your production beyond, in my opinion, just because we're looking for the same things. It's the Joseph Campbell. He spoke about the journey of a hero. There are 17 rules. So if you follow these rules, like and they were implemented by Star Wars and The Matrix, which is finding. We're always looking to discover things that we have lost in the past as humans, or things that we are beyond our nature ability to go after in the future. So you go beyond your being today. So you either go back in the past or you go in the future. So it's nothing that is realistic to your day-to-day life. And that's, I think we see them in all these successful series and movies around the world.
That's kind of driving factor in stories that travel.
Yeah.
Okay. Nils, what do you think, just going back to the cultural specifics of, because obviously in both of your series there were things that were probably maybe even missed by international audiences that a local audience would understand. Do you think being too culturally specific would stop a project from traveling?
No, I think the examples of Gomorra and Romanzo Criminale state the opposite. They've been really local, hyper-local, and Romanzo has been sold in over 60 countries. Gomorra, as I said, is traveling. Gomorra was co-produced on the trust of the Romanzo Criminale production, so Germany and France came in and co-financed the project, although it is very Italian. So more of the opposite. I'm scared about the new scenario. We are now, as a platform, Sky has satellite television in Italy, Germany and UK, and we have been united in a big European platform. And obviously we are asked to co-produce with our English colleagues and German. And I'm really scared about these puddings that could come out of there. I think you always need one country on the driver's seat. That has a very clear vision and that tells a story that is really close to your culture. You can then export that. Now, you can be clever about that. We have a project now that is traveling. It's called The Young Pope. It's written by award-winning director Sorrentino, who won with La Grande Bellezza the Oscar. And that is a story of an American pope who becomes pope in Italy. So it's very Italian, but it obviously is a theme that can travel. But it will be produced in Italy in a very Italian way. It won't become the American point of view of how Italy works. So,
sorry, what language is it?
It will be shot in English,
right,
but it's going to all be
in Italy.
It's Italian based. And the point of view is going to be Italian. I think that can work. We have another story which is Profilers meets Vatican, if I can put it in a nutshell. And again, we'll be co-producing that with FX in the United States. In that case, we have a US showrunner, but again, the core of the story comes from an Italian book. The whole research and production needs to be really credible and Italian, because otherwise it's going to be those movies that used to work, like Under the Tuscan Sun. It's that point of view of Italy, Pizza Mandolino, that people
Tourism,
are bored of. People want stories that are true. So in my view, if you want to develop international projects, be really local about it. And
very authentic.
Very authentic. It needs to be truthful and believable, because the audience is getting more and more sophisticated. They won't believe something that looks fake. So,
in what sense are they becoming more sophisticated? Because they're seeing more content from different parts of the world, so they're better at spotting when something's not real.
I think they accept. I mean, again, we aired Gomorra in the UK, and it has been a success. It was subtitled. We have aired it in Germany, and Der Spiegel had a funny headline, which was "Forget the Sopranos, here come the Savastanos," which is the Gomorra family. But it tells you a bit, let alone the business point of view and the fact that we sold it and got some money for it, about how culturally it has been accepted. To have something like that compared to the Sopranos, which is HBO, big US. I mean, 5 years ago, this was unheard of. I mean, the last thing Italy is famous to export cars, design, and other things I'd rather not mention. It's ironic that a series like Gomorrah, which tells the story about a really negative side of Italy, is what has become in the TV industry the exceptional case that involves really great Italian talent. Because I think the audience was fed up with getting that fake image of Italy. So there's a case of something that tells a true story. Okay, it's not nice, the nice side of Italy, but it works.
And there hasn't been any success on that level in feature films in Italy for a while, is that right?
Besides the exception of Sorrentino winning the Oscar, I would say yes. We had a big issue there for some times because we are the country of the Fellinis and Rossellinis. The next generation always tried to imitate those guys, but those were different times. I truly believe that the Maestro Fellini nowadays would have big problems producing what he used to produce. So we had that gap where people try to imitate these great auteurs. And I think we're now at a stage where we have an Italian director like Stefano Sollima, the director of our series, and the US industry is now asking for him. He's doing an international co-production now on the next book of Saviano, 000, which is all about drug dealing, but on an international level. So there's Mexico, there's US in there. And I think he's going to be, within the next 5 years, one of the top names in the international industry. And he was born as a genre action movie director who went into series, who understands the complexity of a series, which, and there's another side of something we need to resolve, is that so far you had the writer's room, the director and the editor, and they were all separate rooms. Now, what in the US is the showrunner is something that we were missing in Europe, someone who has the vision of a project. So Stefano is one guy who can do that, and he's going to have a future, but he managed to cut the umbilical cord from Fellini.
Interesting, thanks. So Mike, I just want to come back to you because your new project sounds very culturally specific. It's about something very local that probably doesn't have much awareness outside. Could you explain a little bit more about that? And perhaps we could watch the clip. If you could just introduce it first, and then we could watch the clip.
Just to before we do that, I just want to say I think we are living in an age where authenticity, I think, is really the key currency. And clearly the dominance of Hollywood in post-war culture is a culture of inauthenticity. I mean, and I think we are returning to. I mean, people are always interested in other people's culture. I mean, the Bible is not exactly a Western invention, and yet it is a dominant source of literature, etc. And the guitar is an Arabic instrument, and yet it's you tell that to an American and they would go. So I think these are interesting times, and I think globalization of media and all this stuff means actually we're returning to authenticity now. So we're going to show you a little clip of a film called The Man Behind the Microphone, and it's a film about a legendary Tunisian composer and musician and singer whose music really has transcended his time and is very much still very dominant influence upon popular music today. And I mean, I think this is a universal story because art is, because music is, because the role that music plays in a culture is absolutely identical all over the world. There's not a place in the world. I mean, of course, the Taliban tried to ban music and tried to stop music, but they didn't succeed in that. Even, music thrived under the Taliban even. So I think that's one of the kind of qualities that I think this film represents. So perhaps we could show you 1 minute.
A few years ago in a taxi in Paris, I'd heard an uplifting Arabic song on the radio. I was shocked when the Algerian driver told me the singer was the Frank Sinatra of Tunisia, Eddie Jouini, my own grandfather.
انظر إليه وشد اهتمام الجمهور إلى فنه هو الذي جمع بين اللحن والطرب والعزف.
He'd written over 1,000 songs and 50 theatre operettas. He'd been decorated twice by President Bourguiba for his contribution to Tunisian arts and culture. Eddie had been prolific in his 81 years. How had I not heard his music before? If Eddie was heralded as father to his nation, what did this mean for his family? It was at this point I decided to find out. who Eddie Jouini was.
So Mike, could you tell us a bit more about what made you want to do that story and how you can see that traveling?
Well, I think that story, like Searching for Sugar Man, you know, again, is a story about how you can achieve such greatness and yet it somehow be lost to the world. And you know, I love the idea of recovering this cultural treasure, and clearly there are other elements to the story that I'm interested in. He was married to a Jew, which was obviously a relatively controversial thing, but the relationship between Jews and Muslims within Tunisia is a really culturally interesting story. I love the idea, I mean, Dizzy Gillespie, they wrote Night in Tunisia. They wrote that because Tunisia was a hub for jazz and for progressive music, and so all these reasons, I think, and with, of course, Tunisia's, let's say, rebirth as a democratic and progressive society, I think it's a great time to be understanding its heritage in that way. So for a number of reasons, to me, it's a universal story.
I'd like to comment on that piece, and I think it's very interesting. It has two components, in my opinion, at least two components that takes it beyond the borders, the local borders, and takes the local content to international viewers. You have religion, which is across any border. The interfaith kind of dialogue, and you have music. These two themes alone can take this story beyond its local, specificities. So I think that's like a great example of how you can take a local story to the international market.
That's a good point. Yeah, two things that transcend cultural barriers. Shall we go back to talking about this region? And again, we touched on this earlier, but what kind of stories travel around the region? Because obviously there are lots of cultural differences. The Egyptian market is different to the Gulf. Is it difficult to find something that works across the whole pan-Arab market? And do you, especially when you're doing your formats, do you localize them because it's difficult to find something that travels?
The funny part is, like, when we say local, when I say the word local, there are two layers to local. When we say
what does local mean?
Yeah, local means pan-Arab, so 22 countries, that's local. So that's adopting the Western side of content into the Arabic / majority Muslims, because the Arab world is majority Muslims, and we can't take that out of the equation because culture and religion are very intertwined in this part of the region, and we're still there, and that goes back to the young Pope, because if it wasn't the Pope, it won't be so easy, in my opinion, to take it worldwide. So these themes are essential to any kind of production to go beyond boundaries. In the Arab world, I think we have a lot of common things in many countries. Many themes from women's rights to freedom of speech to corruption to the right of existence. We have so many themes that really brings us together. Yet there are more, and it varies from a country to another, where when you dig deeper, you get more local, and the more local you get in your treatment, the more niche you become in your relevance. So the themes really, in the Arab world, we are looking, in my opinion, the most successful series nowadays, and have been and continue to be, and I think in search of, as I see the lineup for the next couple of years, they either talk about existing modern human rights, or they talk about the legend of Arabs and Muslims in the past. So that's why we're so keen on the historic Turkish series that talk about the high times of the Islamic empire around the world.
And that's the appeal, looking at that sort of golden era.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
So these, I think these two, so the past is something, you know, that we take pride into, that we lost. So we're trying to resonate to, and we're trying to find that it matters us that, yeah, we used to be at one point ruling the world. You know, we were so advanced in civil rules, in science, in keeping the society in a progressive mode. And the other part the other theme in production is, yeah, the day-to-day life and the local specificities of each culture and each region. And now in Egypt, they're talking so much about prison, about things in prison. And you'll see like more than one movie and TV series talking about what happens behind bars and what happens to these people in prison. Where in other countries they talk more about what happens inside the house. They go inside the taboos where they were not allowed to be brought to the public.
Right, and there's a lot of social drama in the contemporary drama production.
Yes, we're still in that, more in that level than in the sci-fi, or more in the, you know, the fiction.
Right.
We are in non-fiction mostly.
Okay. Just out of interest, was Gomorrah sold to this region? Either of the two series that you made, would they play in this region, or would they have censorship issues?
I know the Gomorrah, they're talking to a couple of broadcasters here, but they haven't closed yet a deal, so I wouldn't know, but I know that there is an interest.
Right. But that kind of subject matter, sort of gangsters and the underworld, is that something that generally, do you think, would be of interest here? I live in East Asia, and a lot of our film and TV production is all about this subject. As you're right, bad guys are interesting. Do you think it would also work here?
It works here, but it's niche. So it's more, you know, yeah, it's for niche channels, and most of our channels are free to air and family oriented channels. So the niche is becoming now more. We're seeing more and more growth of thematic channels, and that's where such movies would belong, in my opinion.
No, I agree with you, and I think probably where your industry is now, in Italy, niche is now becoming the new main public, and so I guess this will happen here also. It will grow. Certainly, there's some themes that always work. I think what you said about the young poet and about these criminal families, which is what Gomorrah is about. In the end, what works is the conflict, the characters. At a certain point, there's this couple, they're sitting there and they're talking about everyday's problems, about their relationship, about their son. So it's not, obviously then their job is different than yours and mine, because they sell drug all over the world and they're criminals. But the emotions and the relationships are the same, and I think that's what makes it travel and work. The young Pope, okay, the Pope is the cover, but then it's about a man, his rise to power, and his conflicts, the war about power and maintaining power, and his personal life. He's, okay, I won't anticipate too much, but that is what will make it be credible, and that is what will make it travel, and it already has interest of HBO US, because that is the story. It's easy to say, we're doing a fiction about the Pope, so what? That there's been many of those, but they have never been relevant internationally. I think in Italy we probably had about over 50 Pope fictions, but they never traveled. Who cares?
Right, but is this quite a recent trend? TV drama series in the local language that are traveling around Europe and further afield? Because my concept of the TV industry is that it is more local. I've always covered feature films, and films travel and TV doesn't. But are you saying that that's changing now? That more and more local language TV content is traveling in general?
It is from our experience, not necessarily that's a general trend. I think there is a business necessity to put budgets together to make bigger productions. I think we have to be really careful, because as far as I'm concerned, that could easily screw the nice things up that we've done so far, because when it's very basic. So far our editorial decisions, where I sit, have been a very short chain of command, and now I have to do conference calls with my English colleagues and my German, so it's a very practical matter. And if you start to listen too much to what everyone has to say, you lose your editorial focus. So where we are at now, which is something we agreed that we need to put budgets together, but we have some projects where our English cousins will be driving, and other projects where we'll be sitting on the driver's seat and leave creative freedom, because I mean, we've done and seen too many Euro puddings that didn't work. I remember the guys from The Borgias, which has been a quite successful European series. That was a German-French co-production mainly, and we went in at a certain point. And I remember the guys telling me, hey, you want an Italian actor in there? And I said, no, please don't. Because A, if you put a very famous TV face in there, it immediately will look like any other Italian fiction. B, I told them, I don't care whether the actor is Spanish, French, or Canadian, as long as he works for the character that has been written, and as long as he's believable to be a character that lived in those times in that environment. So,
but we're seeing more of these big international TV co-productions, and you're saying that's because of the financing. It's because the budget level's gone up, and not because it's been driven creatively.
I think there's an interesting mix now. I think Canal Plus is producing 000, which is the next Saviano book, with the same creative team that has produced Gomorrah. And we will go in and pre-buy. We're not participating from a creative point of view because we're happy it's going there.
And what language will it be?
It's an international production again, because they're shooting
English,
in the US. And
right.
yeah.
Okay.
But it's driven by a French satellite platform, and we will air it on our channel. So it's interesting because these projects now travel. I think the necessity of all the satellite platforms is the same. We all need productions that are really edgy, really high production value, that drive subscriptions, because at the end of the day, our business is a subscriber business where free TV has big issues. They still live off investment, commercial investments. We need to give something that in the end makes the difference. At the end of the year, when you have to renew your subscription, be it the soccer, which is still one of the main driver, but that is changing as well, be it a good drama or a great entertainment show, our audience need to say, oh, well, this has been, I watched these 3 shows, they really made the difference, I want to subscribe again.
I think it's the quality that we're all looking for here when we do co-productions, especially with, you know, different markets. We're looking to bigger budgets so we can get better quality and expand on our storyline and be able to take it cross-border. So
is co-production common in this region between different countries?
It is, yes. You'll find a lot of an Egyptian with an Emirati or a Saudi channel with a Lebanese or with an Egyptian as well. So there's a lot of co-production. We live on co-production, actually.
Oh, okay. And you were talking about the danger of Euro puddings. Has that become a danger? Do we have Arab puddings, a Lebanese actor in a Syrian series or Egyptian series? Does that happen a lot?
Of course, a lot. Recently, you will find 5 nationalities in one series.
But does it work?
It works because we speak the same language. We speak the same language with the different dialects. So as if you're talking, you know, northern Italy, so southern Italy in just one series. So that's a big difference and an advantage for us, in my opinion.
Right, but each of these series, are they rooted in one specific market? They're not sort of traveling between all these different countries. It's just you have characters from different countries in one location.
But they're sold across the board, across all. They're sold in Egypt, they're monetized across the region. They are watched and seen and followed across the region, because also the stars and you know, the story and the stars are cross borders, so they do cross the border easily because the theme is also Arab theme, so it is relatable to all the audience around the Arab world, and we have many examples.
So there's more of a pan-Arab market than there is a pan-European market.
Yes, I think that, yeah, because of that, because I think Europe is, I heard that recently there is like, you've been encouraged to, and you just confirmed it now, that you're going to more towards producing with other European countries, right? That's happening now.
Correct.
Yeah.
But I think there's a different approach now than there was 10 years ago, because I think the issues I came up with, producers and networks are aware of. So again, Borgias, we were not sitting on the driver's seat. It was a French-German production, and it worked in Italy. So it's I think it's the editorial approach that is important.
Yeah.
And Mike, what are the trends in documentary? Is it quite common to do an international co-production, and is that because of the financing, or is it creatively driven? For example, with this project, the Tunisian project, will that be a co-production?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we are living in an age where film is an international commodity, essentially. And I think whether it's documentary or fiction, the incredible demand for great films and great series means that, you know, I think it's inevitable we'll have an Arabic Breaking Bad and I mean, I think this is just a question of time because people want great stuff, and if people can make it, they'll buy it. And we are free from the national broadcasting industry that we've all grown up in, and in many respects it's failed to respond to this truth. I'd say that's true in Britain and Italy, everywhere.
You mean, sorry, the public broadcasters?
Public broadcasting,
respond,
you know,
okay.
I mean, so, you know, we have seen, you know, globalization has obviously, in my view, its downside, but in terms of culture, I think it's all upside, and I think the market is absolutely demanding greater and greater quality and more engagement, and it doesn't care where these things come from, you know, and I think that's very encouraging. I think it's very exciting. And, you know, I mean, this is the Dubai international film market. It's hard to imagine a film festival that isn't international. It would be insane. I mean, I know there are specific kinds of festivals, but I mean, this is what's so wonderful, I think, about this medium and about the world today, is that we are all sharing in this stuff and can't get enough of it, you know. So I think it's a good time to be a filmmaker.
One of the solutions that we're trying to come up with as production companies and creative talents is we're trying to actually have multiple casts, and we have the same set, same crew, and we have the same story, and we have just cast in, cast out. So
cast from different countries.
Yes. So we're tapping into an international production right now. So to avoid, because people are tired of the dubbing, in my opinion, and the subtitling. They just want more authenticity and more authentic approach. So we are now working, and it has been done. We have experiences here that has been done where, you know, an Arab cast would go and do the scene and come out, and then the English cast would go and do the scene and then come out. So
same story,
that work?
pretty much
same
the same
story,
lines.
same everything.
Work?
Yes, it worked 30 years ago. And we're doing it again now. We are pioneering within a big international series that's produced between the Middle East, our company, and Hollywood-based company.
Where will it shoot?
Sorry?
Where will it shoot?
It will shoot in multiple scenes, but in multiple areas, but primarily in this region.
With two casts, one English, one speaking Arabic.
Yes.
Okay, very interesting. Well, I'm aware that we're running out of time. Sorry, Mike, did you want to say something?
No, and I think technology, can prove very interesting, and in time to come, you'll watch a film and you'll select the language you want to hear it or watch it in. I mean, I think whether it's dubbed or translated or, you know, I think that this simply won't be an issue in time to come, and, you know.
But what about, everyone says in the North American market, they'll never read subtitles. Do you think that's true? Because I know in Europe people are becoming more open-minded to watching. Even in the UK, people will watch subtitle Scandinavian dramas.
Let's see what the market. It would rather watch Gomorrah in, you know, subtitled something incredible than some lazy, you know, has-been thing in English. I think, you know, I think that I mean.
We're trying to. We've been asked by the Weinstein Company, who acquired the rights of Gomorrah for the US market, to do a test and dub the first episode in English, which is something unheard of because everyone in the American market will tell you we don't watch something dubbed. I mean, in Italy we have always, or other European countries, dubbed movies coming from Hollywood, so that's actually part of the industry. I think let's wait and see, because it could be one of these preconceptions, because if you do it right, if it feels right to the US ear, why not in the end, if you think about it, if it's dubbed properly. Now obviously in Italy we have a big dubbing industry, the US are less used to do it, so we're dubbing it in Italy with an Italian company, with US voices, so it's all new ground, but it's an interesting experiment.
I think you should take us as a case study. Take our region as a case study, because media is not an industry yet. It's becoming an industry. And we are used to subtitling and dubbed, but we're tired of, because we're distracted from the actual happenings in the actual scene and looking and reading as if we're reading a newspaper. So we're tired of that. So, we're distracted between the subtitles and the actual events. And I don't think that's really sustainable. That means that production standards will start dropping, or there is a malfunction in the actual production industry in the US if they go from, in my opinion, local language with local cast to subtitling. It will be, in my opinion, it's unless it's something really, really, just beyond any expectations and must-see piece.
It is.
Yeah.
One last question, and I'm going to turn it to the floor. Mike, you just mentioned lazy English remakes. Do you think there are any cases of local language content that's been remade in English and it's been successful? Any of you? Could you think of anything that has really worked? Local language content, whether it's Arabic or French or German or Italian, it's been remade in English successfully. Can we think of any examples?
Well, I mean,
I'm racking my brains.
Well, The Godfather was an Italian book.
Well, I mean, not a book, a film or TV series.
Off the top of my head.
Anyone here? No? Ah, thank you.
There we are.
Actually, I didn't see the English movie, so I can't comment. Yeah, tricky one, right? Okay, so I'm going to turn it to the floor now. Does anybody have a question? Thank you. Do we have a mic?
Hi. This is a slightly sort of odd question, but I was just wondering about children's content, because that's something that I'm involved with. We've talked a lot about, sort of TV series or adult content. How does children's content differ when you do production, or are you doing are you producing children's content?
Short content.
Yeah, children's.
Oh, children's. Sorry,
children's. Sorry if you can't hear me. Children's content, series or film.
The difference between children content and what we've discussing so far, is that the question?
I was just wondering if you were producing or you are producing children's content, and what the difference is between what we've talked about today and how you would go about doing children's content.
Okay, we don't produce, but I live in a platform that has strong children package channels, so we have Disney Channel, Cartoon Networks, you name it. I don't know, from my experience, there is international brands like the Teletubbies, and when I used to watch the Teletubbies with my kids when they were young, I always thought someone took some really good drugs there, so obviously drug taking is a good issue. There's strong brands and properties that work across the country, but again, the stuff we export as children content is tied to the Italian culture, so Pinocchio has been sold in many countries, and that's really local. I would think that 80% of the content we have for children is US content that we dub. It's Disney, it's that kind of stuff.
Yeah, Barney is the most famous, character. Heidi, yeah. Well, Barney, I think now is like rocking.
Any more questions? One thing we didn't touch on actually is genre, because we were talking very much about drama and very adult content. But in terms of genre, people always say, well, comedy doesn't travel. Action and thriller can travel, but comedy not. I mean, do you agree with that you can't find comedy concepts that can cross borders?
As I say, I think the best stories and the best ideas are universal. And again, you're going to ask me to think of an international comedy film that's transcended. But I mean, I don't know if Borat, for instance, I don't know how that travelled. It would be interesting to know around the region. I think, and I think
some people loved it and some people hated it
right,
around the world.
Yeah.
Like you do with the. I think that there is some truth there, because we all suffer for the same reasons, but we laugh for different reasons. I think culturally, you watch an Italian comedy, it's not might not be too funny for an English audience, and I think some English comedies that I used to watch from Fawlty Towers onwards have me as a German who grew up in Italy and lived in UK, yes, but the Italian audience wouldn't get it.
Good point.
I think comedy travels well, in my opinion, especially if it's personality-driven comedy, not language-driven, and we laugh at the common jokes. I guess if it's not culturally relevant, then we would laugh at them. Situation-based comedy, and that's easy to, for them to travel. I think reality as well is another big genre that can travel.
I think Charlie Chaplin did quite well.
Internationally, that's a very good point. But he didn't speak, did he?
Oh, towards the end of his
There you go. Okay, well, I think, do we have any more questions? I think we'll leave it at that point. And I like your expression that we suffer for the same reasons, but we laugh for different reasons. Thank you.
Thank you.